Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. The 2008 elections is a watershed election in Zimbabwe, in the sense that up until then, the country had not held free, fair, and credible elections. SADC, credit where credit is due, had put the ZANU-PF regime under enormous pressure to carry out changes which made it possible to have what can only be described as the nearest that Zimbabwe has ever got to free, fair, and credible elections in 2008. One of the changes that SADC pressured the regime to carry out was this issue of that the votes must be counted at the polling station, and the results announced at the polling station. And a copy of the results of that polling station will be given to all the key stakeholders and posted on the board for all the public to see. These changes and other changes gave the ordinary Zimbabwean the confidence that this was going to be a free, fair, and credible elections. And the people voted accordingly. The March vote was the nearest the country had ever got to holding free, fair, and credible elections. When the vote counting started, it was clear that ZANU-PF was going to lose. And many of the ZANU-PF officials realized this and they accepted it. Some did not. And among those who did not accept that ZANU-PF was setting for a defeat was Mnangagwa. Here is an account of what happened in 2008 election from one who was heavily involved in those elections, Dr. Ibbo Mandaza.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. And Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost the election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns, was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga, and then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. I don't know. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee of subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth. They know it. And the report has never been published. The report to this day. That tells you. Is it complicit behavior? I don't know. But to get back to 2008, the runoff took place. Mugabe was sworn in at midnight before boarding a plane with Mbeki to Sharm el-Sheikh. Ambassador, I forgot to mention that. Yes. I'm not talking about it was contrived, but clearly there was a definite plan to keep Mugabe in office. And it's no secret that I had Thabo speaking the other day, saying the Zimbabwean people came together to form the GNU. It's only half true. Morgan Tsvangirai was literally regimented into the GNU. That's a fact.
The tragedy for Zimbabwe is that this happened. Here is Mnangagwa boasting about his own role in 2008.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komogwenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zivi gadzirai chi cabinet asina kuda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusuru, we know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
Well, what happened in 2008 has become one of those dark chapters in the country's history. The very fact that those who were behind this barbarism are in State House only goes to show how little we really understood what went on then. Is this indifference to something that is outrageous, that really is one of the root problems why we are a failed state? We are willing to tolerate things that we should really never tolerate. ZANU-PF behavior in that electoral coup, notably of the leadership, must be condemned unreservedly. And one can only say, let's hope one of these fine days the truth will come out. And when it does, those responsible for what happened must be held to account. We should never, ever compromise on that. And I think it is our failure to pursue, because many of us, although we didn't know the details, we appreciated, we understood the basics. That ZANU-PF had blatantly cheated in the March vote count to manufacture the runoff, and then had used brute violence during the runoff. The runoff should have never happened if it had not been for ZANU-PF cheating in the vote count. What happened next was that ZANU-PF was forced to form the government of national unity. We, the people, should have understood that the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to ensure what had happened in the March blatant cheating and then the wanton violence during the runoff will never ever happen again. Unfortunately, not even one token democratic reform was implemented during the GNU. The blame for it we have to blame the opposition. There is no doubt that Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends were bribed by ZANU-PF with the trappings of high office, and they forgot about implementing the reforms. I think one of the things that makes the whole situation an outrage is that so many people had been killed in 2008. And therefore, then it is unbelievable that the MDC leaders would have failed to appreciate that the number one priority, the number one task for the GNU would be to make sure that the barbarism of 2008 would never be repeated. And so by failing to implement even one token reform, they made it possible for ZANU-PF to continue with the blatant cheating and wanton violence to stay in power. If we had implemented the democratic reforms during the 2008 to 2013 GNU, the military coup of 2017 would have been avoided. Zimbabwe will be in a different place. Particularly when you notice that the same people behind the electoral coup of 2008 were the same people who were behind the military coup of 2017. So if we had implemented the democratic reforms and thus made sure that from 2013 the country had a democratically elected government accountable to the people and not a dictatorship. One can only say if those in power, in the army particularly, would have made the mistake of staging a military coup, they would have found resistance from all quarters. One of the reasons why most people shrugged their shoulders when they heard about the military coup was that one could not, in all honesty, criticize the military coup, given that this was one way of finally getting rid of Mugabe. As much as people were not sure that the military coup would deliver a competent democratic government, they were not going to resist the military coup either. Because at least it did end Mugabe's dictatorship. Up to now, the country is still in limbo. We have got a ZANU-PF dictatorship that has been rigging elections to stay in power. And the opposition has been corrupted to the point where it is no exaggeration that they are, just as much as the judiciary, the police, the army, they are in ZANU-PF's deep pockets. Where will change come from? I believe change will have to come from the people themselves. We, the people, have got to wake up to the political reality that we have got a corrupt and tyrannical ZANU-PF ruling elite, backed by a corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless MDC/CCC opposition. We can end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. And one way of making sure we do that is articulating on issues of national importance and follow them through. I believe if the people of Zimbabwe had articulated their position regarding the 2008 election, how ZANU-PF had cheated in the counting and he had used wanton violence to try to win those elections, and had kept the MDC on their toes in terms of implementing reforms, the country would have been in a different place. The most important challenge right now is to make sure that Zimbabweans do not participate in the 2028 elections without any meaningful reforms being implemented. Because doing so will only give ZANU-PF legitimacy. We don't want to go down that road. We must not go down that road. Think about it. But to come back to the topic today, the 2008 elections were rigged in the sense that Mnangagwa and Chiwenga disregarded the fact that MDC had won those elections. It was an electoral coup, and those two individuals were behind it. It is an outrage that those two individuals have ended up in State House when in reality they should be in prison. Let's hope one of these fine days the truth of what happened in 2008 will be known. And those who were responsible for the event will be held to account. It is important as a nation that we should be championing the issue of rule of law and that no one should ever be above the law. We are in this mess because we have allowed ZANU-PF leaders to be above the law for far too long. This we must start addressing and putting it right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.